Hey guys, tonight we're going to sink into the quiet rhythms of a bygone era, drifting back to a time when the world moved at the pace of a plow horse, not a rocket ship. Imagine the crisp, cool air of a Tudor English morning. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke, as the first faint chirps of a robin break the stillness. You're there, nestled in a small, rough-hewn cottage, the rising sun casting long shadows through the tiny window. This is the boring history for sleep-slow days of English farmers. During the Tudor era, and trust me, the sheer lack of thrilling adventure here might just be your express ticket to dreamland. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together, your day. As a Tudor English farmer, doesn't begin with an alarm clock, but with the insistent, ancient call of the dawn chorus. The roosters, those perpetually optimistic timekeepers, crow their greetings long before the sun has fully cleared the horizon. You stir on your straw mattress, perhaps sharing a small, crowded room with your family. The embers in the hearth a faint red glow. There's no hitting the snooze button. The day's work is dictated by the sun and the hungry mouths of your livestock, not by personal preference. You stretch, feeling the aches of yesterday's toil already setting in. And slowly, deliberately, begin to rise. The air is cold, damp, and carries the smells of the farm earth, animal, and the faint, comforting aroma of wood smoke, a smell that would cling to your clothes and hair throughout the day. As you step outside, the chill hits you. A bracing slap of reality. The yard is still cloaked in a misty pre-dawn gloom. The grass heavy with dew. Your first priority, even before your own breakfast, is always the animals. They are the beating heart of your livelihood, and their well-being directly translates to your family's survival through harsh winters and lean times. You trudge towards the byre, your breath pluming in the frigid air, the squelch of mud beneath your worn boots a familiar sound. The cows moo softly, patiently, their warm bodies radiating a welcome heat that cuts through the morning chill. You begin the milking, a repetitive, rhythmic task performed by hand. Your fingers strong and accustomed to the teats, the warm milk squirting into the wooden pail with a soft, steady thwip-thwip. It's a quiet meditation, this early morning ritual, performed almost entirely by feel in the dim, lantern-lit space. The gentle lowing of the cows and the rhythmic sound of milking are the first lullabies of your day. A mainstream historical fact is that daily life for Tudor farmers was entirely dictated by the agrarian calendar and the immediate needs of their livestock. There was no concept of a weekend or fixed working hours as we understand them today. Your labor stretched from the first light of dawn till the last vestiges of twilight, constantly adapting to the ever-changing seasons and the immediate necessities of the farm. Your existence was inextricably linked to the land and its creatures, a constant, demanding cycle of tending, feeding, and nurturing. Every animal, every plant, had its own schedule, and you were merely their diligent servant. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some farmers would actually sing or whistle to their cows during milking, believing it helped the milk let down more easily, making the process quicker and more efficient. Whether this ancient bovine serenading actually worked, or if it simply served to make the lonely, monotonous task of early morning milking a little less dreary for the human doing it, is a delightful point of historical debate. But imagine the soft, tuneless hum filling the quiet byre, a tiny, personal concert for your patient. Four-legged companions, perhaps even one with off-key notes. You might even find yourself humming a simple, repetitive tune, not for the cows, but for your own sanity as you squat there in the chill. Historians still argue whether the level of animal husbandry and agricultural knowledge in Tudor England was genuinely sophisticated and based on empirical observation, or largely based on traditional, inherited practices passed down through generations with limited underlying scientific understanding. Was it careful observation and learned wisdom gleaned over centuries of trial and error? Or simply doing what your father and his father had always done, because it worked? Whatever the exact mix, your family's very survival depended on getting it right. Day after slow, deliberate day, year after grinding year, there was precious little room for error when your livelihood was so directly tied to the whims of nature and the health of your flock. After milking the cows, you might move on to the grunting pigs, who seem perpetually hungry in their muddy sty, or the clucking chickens, scratching impatiently for their morning scatter of grain. Each animal, from the largest ox to the smallest chick, requires your individual attention, your knowing gaze assessing their health, their hunger, their general well-being. The stable calls next, where your trusty horse or oxen, crucial for plowing and transport, whinnies or lows a soft greeting, you groom them, feed them, prepare them for the day's heavy work in the fields. These early morning chores are the quiet, foundational moments of your day, setting the stage for the hours of demanding labor ahead. There's a certain peaceful monotony to it, a calming repetition that feels as old as the hills themselves, a rhythm that human beings have followed for thousands of years. You're not rushing, you're simply moving, responding to the ancient, unchanging calls of the farm, ensuring that all living things under your care are tended to before you even consider your own needs. It's a testament to the sheer, unyielding daily effort required just to exist. As the last dribbles of milk fill your pail and the chickens settle back into their contented scratching, your own stomach begins to rumble. A gentle reminder that even the most diligent farmer needs sustenance. This brings us to the simple yet crucial ritual of breaking the fast. The Tudor farmer's breakfast. Forget elaborate spreads of pastries, fruit, and artisan coffee, your morning meal is about fuel, pure and unadorned, designed to power you through hours of strenuous labor. You step back into the dim warmth of your cottage, where your wife or perhaps an older child is already stirring the embers, coaxing a small flame to life. The centerpiece of your Tudor breakfast, indeed of most meals, is likely bread. This isn't the soft, airy white bread you might find in a modern supermarket. It's a dense, dark loaf, often made from coarser grains like rye or barley, sometimes mixed with oats. This brown bread, or maslin bread, a mix of wheat and rye, is hearty, chewy, and incredibly filling. It's the result of a laborious process, grinding the grain, kneading the dough, and baking it in a communal oven, perhaps once a week. You slice off a thick hunk with a well-worn knife, its texture coarse against your fingers. This bread is your bedrock, the reliable constant in a diet that can otherwise be unpredictable. A mainstream historical fact is that bread was the staple food for the vast majority of the population in Tudor England, accounting for a significant portion of their daily caloric intake. The type and quality of bread consumed often served as a subtle indicator of social status, with finer white bread reserved for the wealthy, and coarser, darker loaves being the norm for laborers and farmers. You're not getting sourdough or ciabatta. You're getting the honest, unpretentious loaf that has kept generations alive. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some Tudor farmers would make a dish called pottage, a thick, savory porridge made from boiling grains like oats, barley, or peas, with whatever vegetables or scraps of meat were available. This was often cooked in a large pot over the hearth, simmering all day and serving as a continuous meal. For breakfast, a bowl of cold pottage, perhaps leftover from the previous night, might be warmed up or even eaten cold, providing a quick, easy, and incredibly nutritious start to the day. It's a far cry from your morning cereal, but arguably much more practical for sustained energy. You might even discover a rogue turnip or two lingering in the depths of your bowl. Historians still argue whether the dietary health of the average Tudor farmer was robust due to a diet of whole grains and fresh produce, or precarious due to seasonal scarcity and reliance on a limited number of food sources. Were they surprisingly healthy, or constantly teetering on the edge of malnutrition? It's likely a complex picture, varying greatly by season, region, and individual circumstance. But the constant, back-breaking labor certainly burned off any extra calories. Accompanying your bread, you might have cheese, made from your own cow's milk, robust and aged, its tang a welcome contrast to the bread's earthiness. Perhaps a piece of salted meat or cured fish, a precious source of protein, especially during the leaner winter months. Meat was not an everyday luxury. It was carefully preserved and portioned. You might have a slice of bacon, perhaps, but certainly not a whole rasher. The taste of salt, vital for preservation, would be strong and satisfying. For drink, forget tea or coffee. Those are centuries away for the common English farmer. Your beverage is likely ale. Not the strong, intoxicating ale of the taverns, but a weaker, thin, small beer, or table beer, brewed at home. This was often safer to drink than water, which could be contaminated, and provided a modicum of calories and hydration. Even children would drink small beer. You lift the wooden tankard to your lips, the slightly yeasty, refreshing taste of familiar comfort, its hydration and sustenance rolled into one. Imagine living in a time when your safest drink was essentially very weak. Flat beer. It certainly puts modern concerns about sugary drinks into perspective. The meal is eaten quickly, efficiently, often in silence or with only murmured conversation. There's no dawdling, no lingering over newspapers or morning news. The sun is rising higher, and the fields beckon. Your breakfast is a functional, necessary ritual, a moment to refuel before the relentless demands of the day truly begin. It's about energy, not indulgence. As the last morsel of bread is chewed and the final gulp of ale swallowed, you rise, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and prepare to step back out into the cool morning air, ready for the next phase of your slow, laborious, yet fundamentally grounded existence. The very act of eating is part of the work, a preparation for more work, a continuous cycle of effort and replenishment, with your stomach adequately, if not sumptuously, filled. The real work of the day truly begins. You step out of the cottage, the morning mist now burning off under the strengthening Tudor sun, and head straight for the open fields. This is where the vast majority of your life is spent, engaged in the timeless, demand-in ballet of fieldwork's gentle rhythm, the endless cycle of plowing, sowing, and harvesting that dictates the very pulse of your existence. There's no rush, no frantic urgency, just a steady, relentless application of muscle and will, dictated by the land itself. Imagine yourself gripping the handles of a heavy, wooden plow, the rough-hewn wood familiar in your calloused hands. Ahead of you, your team of oxen or your sturdy horse strains against the harness, their powerful muscles rippling with each slow, deliberate step. The iron share of the plow bites into the earth, turning over dark, rich furrows of soil, releasing the earthy scent of the waking land. This is incredibly demanding work, requiring immense strength and endurance. You lean into the plow, guiding its path, feeling every tremor as it cuts through stubborn roots and rocks. Your gaze is fixed on the ground ahead, ensuring a straight furrow, a neat line across the vast expanse of the field. It's a rhythmic, almost hypnotic motion, one foot following the other. The steady clop-clop of hooves and the creak of wood providing the soundtrack to your labor. A mainstream historical fact is that the open field system was still prevalent across much of England during the Tudor era. This meant that individual farmers like yourself would typically hold scattered strips of land within a large, unenclosed common field, rather than consolidated, fenced-off plots. This system, while promoting community, also meant less efficiency and more time spent moving between different strips, adding to the day's slow pace. You weren't working in isolation. Your efforts were part of a larger communal agricultural endeavor. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the depth and straightness of your plow furrows were considered a mark of a good farmer, almost an artistic expression of your skill. A crooked furrow not only looked bad, but also indicated inefficient use of the land and effort. So, there was a quiet, unspoken competition among farmers to lay down the straightest, most even lines. Imagine the subtle glances exchanged between neighbors. A silent judgment passed on the neatness or lack thereof of a fellow farmer's newly plowed field. It added a tiny dash of competitive spirit to an otherwise monotonous task. Historians still argue whether the open field system, with its communal labor and shared resources, fostered stronger community bonds than the later enclosure movements, or if it simply perpetuated inefficiencies and limited individual innovation. Was it a heartwarming example of cooperation, or a frustrating obstacle to progress? For you, the farmer, it simply was, the way your ancestors had always done it, and the way your children likely would too. The specific tasks you perform throughout the day depend entirely on the season. In spring, it's sowing, scattering precious seeds by hand, a wide, sweeping gesture that broadcasts the promise of future harvests across the freshly turned earth. You walk methodically, your pace even, ensuring a relatively uniform spread, hoping for good weather and a bountiful yield. The hope of the coming year hangs in the air with every handful of seeds. Summer brings weeding and tending. You spend countless hours bent over, painstakingly pulling up stubborn weeds that compete with your crops for nutrients and sunlight. This is tedious, back-breaking work, often under a hot sun. The buzzing of insects a constant companion. You might also be mending fences, clearing ditches, or repairing tools. Always something to do. Always something demanding your attention. There's no downtime, just different kinds of work. Then comes autumn, the season of harvest. This is the most crucial, most labor-intensive period, often involving the entire family and perhaps even neighbors lending a hand in communal effort. You grasp the scythe, its sharp blade singing as it sweeps through the tall stalks of wheat or barley, laying them down in neat rows. It's physically exhausting, demanding every ounce of your strength. Knowing that the success of the harvest means the difference between survival and hardship in the coming winter. The golden fields stretch before you, promising sustenance, but only if you can bring in every precious kernel. You gather the sheaves, bind them, and haul them to the threshing floor, where the grain will be separated from the straw. This is a time of immense effort, but also of deep satisfaction, seeing the fruits of your year-long labor gathered before you. Winter, of course, brings its own set of challenges, but often a slight reprieve from the direct demands of the fields. The earth sleeps, and so, in a way, do you, though other tasks fill the time. But for most of the year, the fields are your office, your church, your entire world. The rhythm is slow, dictated by the relentless turning of the seasons, the patient growth of plants, and the unyielding demands of the land. There's a profound simplicity to it, a deep connection to the earth that modern life has largely forgotten. You are truly a creature of the soil, and its gentle, demanding rhythm is etched into your very being as the sun climbs higher and your muscles hum with the steady ache of field work. Your attention shifts, albeit subtly, to another crucial aspect of your Tudor farm life, the slow pace of caring for your livestock throughout the seasons. These animals aren't just creatures, they are living capital, providing milk, meat, wool, leather, and most importantly, the brute force needed to work your fields. Their well-being is intrinsically linked to your family's survival, meaning their needs dictate a significant portion of your day, every day, with a quiet, unhurried dedication. Imagine the gentle lowing of your cows as you guide them out to pasture, their broad flanks swaying with each step. In the warmer months, much of their care involves simply ensuring they have access to fresh grazing land and clean water. You'll spend time observing them, looking for any signs of illness or injury. A limp, a cough, a dullness in their eyes. Your knowledge of animal ailments isn't gleaned from books, but from generations of observation, passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. You learn to read their subtle cues, understanding their needs almost instinctively. It's a deep, unspoken language between farmer and beast. A mainstream historical fact is that livestock was absolutely central to the Tudor economy and the sustenance of rural communities. Animals provided not just food, but also essential raw materials for clothing, tools, and construction, making their health and productivity paramount. A strong ox team could mean the difference between a successful harvest and a hungry winter. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some farmers believed that talking to their animals, even confiding in them, helped keep them calm and productive. You might find yourself murmuring reassurances to a skittish ewe during lambing, or offering gentle praise to an ox after a particularly tough stretch of plowing. It's a quiet, almost whimsical aspect of farm life. This silent conversation between human and animal, suggesting a bond deeper than mere utility. Perhaps your horse even had a peculiar habit that only you understood. A twitch of its ear or a flick of its tail that signaled its mood. Historians still argue whether the common Tudor farmer genuinely possessed a deep, empathetic understanding of animal behavior, or if their interactions were primarily driven by economic necessity and practical management. Was it a mutual respect, or a purely transactional relationship? It was likely a blend, as the constant, close proximity to these animals would inevitably foster a certain level of familiarity and even affection, despite the harsh realities of their ultimate purpose. Sheep. 2. Demand constant attention. Their wool is a vital commodity, providing warmth for clothing and a source of income. You might spend hours tending the flock, moving them to fresh pastures, and keeping a watchful eye out for predators like wolves or wild dogs. Though these were becoming rarer in populated areas by the Tudor era. In spring, the busy period of lambing arrives, a time of anxious waiting and sometimes frantic assistance as new life enters the world. You'll be up at all hours, ensuring the ewes are delivering safely, sometimes pulling lambs yourself, your hands covered in the sticky warmth of birth. Pigs, while perhaps less aesthetically pleasing, are invaluable for their meat. They are generally kept closer to the homestead, often rooting around in the farmyard. Your care for them involves providing scraps, ensuring their stee is reasonably clean, and, of course, the eventual, somber task of slaughtering when the time comes. This is a grim but necessary part of the cycle. A stark reminder of where your food truly comes from. Every part of the pig is used, nothing wasted. A testament to the farmer's efficiency and the necessity of frugality. Winter, of course, brings its own set of challenges for livestock. With pastures barren or covered in snow, you must rely on stored hay and fodder to feed your animals. This means meticulously managing your feed supplies, ensuring enough is gathered during the summer and autumn to last through the lean months. Your days involve hauling heavy bundles of hay, break-in ice on water troughs, and ensuring your animals are sheltered from the biting wind and cold. The warmth radiating from the clustered bodies of your animals in the byre or stable is a welcome comfort, both for them and for you. The diseases that could sweep through a herd or flock were a constant threat, and understanding crude remedies or preventative measures was crucial. You learn which herbs to give a sickly cow, how to mend a simple wound, and when to isolate an ailing animal to prevent the spread of contagion. Your methods are empirical, passed down through experience, often with a mix of practical wisdom and folk superstition. These animals are your companions, your providers, and sometimes your greatest worry. Their slow, cyclical needs anchor your days, demanding your quiet, patient labor, ensuring that the rhythm of the farm continues, year after demanding year. With the livestock fed and settled, and the fields either awaiting your plow or already absorbing your efforts, your attention might then turn to the myriad tasks of craft and repair that fill the quieter moments of a Tudor farmer's day. There's no quick trip to the hardware store for a replacement part, no ordering a new tool online. Everything broken must be mended. Everything needed must be made, often by your own hand. With ingenuity born of necessity, you step into the small, earthy workshop area, perhaps just a corner of a lean-to or a part of your barn, and survey the array of simple tools, each one a testament to patient, practical skill. Imagine the feel of rough wood beneath your fingers as you whittle a new handle for a broken rake, or the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron as you straighten a bent plowshare. Your hands, though calloused and strong from fieldwork, possess a surprising dexterity for these finer tasks. You might be sharpening the blade of your scythe, meticulously honing its edge until it gleams, ready to slice through stubborn stalks with ease. This isn't just maintenance, it's an intimate relationship with your tools, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, ensuring they are always ready for the next demanding task. A dull tool doesn't just make work harder, it costs you time, and time is life. A mainstream historical fact is that self-sufficiency was paramount for Tudor farmers. Most rural households produced a vast majority of what they consumed and used, from their food and clothing to their tools and building materials. Specialization was far less common than it is today. You were, by necessity, a jack of all trades, a master of basic crafts essential for survival. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some farmers would have specific, inherited luck charms or rituals associated with mending tools, believing that a certain incantation or a particular phase of the moon would ensure the repair held fast. You might find yourself quietly murmuring an old rhyme as you hammer a stubborn nail. A mix of practical skill and ancient superstition guides your hand. It's a small, almost endearing peek into the mindset of a people who lived so closely with the unpredictable forces of nature and relied on every possible advantage, seen or unseen. Perhaps you even had a favorite hammer, passed down through generations, imbued with the luck of your ancestors. Historians still argue whether the apparent simplicity of Tudor-era tools masked a highly sophisticated understanding of materials and design for their time, or if they were largely inefficient compared to later innovations. Were they crude but effective, or did they significantly limit productivity? For you, the farmer, they were simply what you had, and you learned to coax the most out of them through sheer skill and perseverance. Beyond agricultural tools, your skills extended to household items. A broken stool leg. You'd fashion a new one from a sturdy branch. A leaky roof, you'd gather thatch and patiently weave it into place. Layer by overlapping layer, hoping it would hold against the next downpour. Your hands might be rough, but they were capable of surprising finesse when needed. You might be making simple wooden pegs, preparing firewood for the hearth, or even attempting rudimentary carpentry to shore up a sagging barn door. Every repair saved precious resources and prevented a trip to a distant town, which was a time-consuming and often costly endeavor. The women of the household, too, were masters of craft and repair. They would be engaged in an endless cycle of mending clothes, patching worn fabrics, and repurposing old materials. A tear in a tunic wouldn't lead to it being discarded, but carefully stitched, perhaps with a colorful patch that told its own silent story of wear and resilience. The spinning wheel would hum almost constantly, turning raw wool into yarn, which would then be knitted or woven into new garments, or used for repairs. There was no fast fashion here. Every stitch, every thread, was valued. Even basket weaving was a common skill. You might spend a drizzly afternoon plaiting rushes or willow branches into new baskets for carrying produce, or mending old ones whose bottoms had worn through. It's a quiet, rhythmic activity, your fingers deftly manipulating the natural fibers, creating something both beautiful and eminently practical from the bounty of your surroundings. The air would be filled with the subtle scent of green wood and dry straw. These tasks of craft and repair weren't seen as separate from the main work of farming. They were an intrinsic, constant part of it, woven into the fabric of daily life. They were moments of focused, meditative labor, where your hands and mind worked in concert, solving tangible problems with practical solutions. It's a reminder of a time when people lived in much closer relationship to the objects they owned, understanding their construction, their weaknesses, and how to extend their usefulness through diligent care. You knew every knot in your rope, every crack in your bucket, every creak in your plow. This deep intimacy with your possessions bred a profound sense of self-reliance and quiet satisfaction, knowing that you could provide for your family not just by tilling the soil, but by mending the very tools that helped you do so. As the sun reaches its zenith and begins its slow descent, casting longer shadows across your fields, your day isn't solely defined by the demanding rhythm of manual labor. There's another, equally vital, aspect of your Tudor existence, the subtle yet constant ebb and flow of village life. The interactions and simple diversions that knit together the fabric of your community. You aren't an isolated unit. You are part of a tightly bound web of families, neighbors, and shared destinies. Imagine yourself making your way along the muddy track that serves as the village street, perhaps heading to the communal well for water, or passing by the blacksmith's forge. The sounds of the village are your daily soundtrack, the distant bark of a dog, the laughter of children playing, the clanging of the smith's hammer, and the low murmur of voices exchanging greetings and news. This is your world beyond the fields, a compact universe where everyone knows everyone else, and interdependence is not a choice, but a necessity. There's no anonymity here. Your reputation, your family's standing, is shaped by every interaction. A mainstream historical fact is that Tudor villages were largely self-sufficient communities, with most inhabitants rarely traveling more than a few miles from their birthplace. This localized existence fostered strong community bonds, but also meant that social interactions were intense and inescapable. Your neighbors were not just people living nearby. They were your kin, your labor partners, your gossip column, and your support system all rolled into one. Now, for a quirky tidbit, disagreements within the village, from squabbles over stray animals to boundary disputes between land strips, were often settled not by formal legal means, but through informal mediation by respected elders or the parish priest. Imagine your neighbor, Thomas, grumbling about your cow straying into his unfenced strip of barley, and the village elder patiently listening to both sides over a shared mug of ale, trying to broker a peace. It was community justice at its most grassroots, sometimes effective, sometimes simply delaying the next inevitable squabble. It was a very organic way of managing conflict, often relying more on persuasion than brute force. Historians still argue whether the close-knit nature of Tudor village life fostered genuine solidarity and mutual aid, or if it also led to intense social pressures, gossip, and limited individual freedom. Was it a harmonious idyll of cooperation, or a suffocating environment of constant scrutiny? For you, it was simply life, a delicate balance between support and obligation. The church, of course, stands at the very heart of village life, not just spiritually, but socially. Sunday is a day of rest from hard labor, but not from activity. You attend Mass, sharing space with everyone from the humble cottager to the local squire, all united in prayer. After the service, the churchyard often becomes a vibrant social hub, a place for exchanging news, arranging marriages, discussing harvests, and simply catching up. It's the closest thing to a town square you have, a focal point for the week's social interactions. You might hear news of a distant market, or the impending arrival of a peddler with new goods. Little snippets of the outside world that filter into your quiet existence. Beyond the church, simple diversions punctuate the otherwise demanding routine. There might be a local alehouse, a humble establishment where men could gather after a long day in the fields, sharing a jug of small beer and tales of the day's triumphs or woes. The conversations are slow, deliberate, punctuated by long silences and the comforting crackle of the hearth fire. It's a place for camaraderie, for blowing off a little steam, for escaping the confines of your small cottage for a few precious hours. The jokes are simple, the laughter hearty, and the worries of the farm momentarily recede. Children, of course, provide much of the spontaneous amusement. You'd see them playing simple games with sticks and stones, chasing chickens, or mimicking the adults in their chores. Their unbridled energy and innocent curiosity are a constant source of joy and occasional exasperation. Evenings might involve storytelling by the fire, passing down local legends, family histories, or moral tales. These oral traditions are vital, preserving knowledge and entertainment in a time when books are rare and literacy is limited. You might tell your own children about your great-grandfather's encounter with a particularly cunning fox, or a story of a particularly harsh winter. The passing of traveling merchants or tinkers through the village is also a rare but welcome diversion, bringing news from afar and perhaps a few coveted items, a new needle, a length of brightly colored ribbon, or a small trinket. These encounters are fleeting but memorable, offering a tantalizing glimpse of the wider world beyond your village boundaries. It's like seeing a rare bird, a brief flash of something utterly different. Ultimately, village life in Tudor England moves at a deliberate, human pace. It's a world where relationships are deep and interdependent, where gossip travels faster than any messenger, and where simple pleasures, a shared laugh, a helping hand, a familiar face provide the bedrock of your social existence. You belong here, rooted in this community as deeply as your crops are rooted in the soil. And that sense of belonging is a powerful, calming force in your slow, steady life. As your life in the Tudor village unfolds, you become acutely aware that every single task, every decision, is profoundly governed by the seasonal cycles, the relentless turning of the English weather wheel, demanding constant adaptation from you and your land. There's no escaping it. No modern climate control to ease the extremes. You live and die by the sun, the rain, the frost, and the very subtle shifts in the air. This deep connection to nature's rhythm isn't just observed, it's felt in your bones. A constant, undeniable force. Imagine the crisp, hopeful air of spring. As the days gradually lengthen and the sun's warmth coaxes the first green shoots from the seemingly barren earth. This is a time of immense activity and optimism. You're busy preparing the soil, turning over heavy furrows with your plow, breaking up clods of earth until it's fine and receptive. Then comes the crucial task of sowing seeds, scattering them by hand across your strips of land. A hopeful gesture against the vastness of the future. You're constantly watching the sky, praying for gentle rains to nourish the nascent crops, but dreading the unexpected late frost that could wipe out weeks of effort in a single night. This is a period of intense physical labor, but also one buoyed by the promise of renewal. A quiet faith in the earth's bounty. A mainstream historical fact is that agricultural life in Tudor England was entirely cyclical, with a distinct set of tasks allocated to each season, ensuring that land was utilized efficiently and resources managed effectively for the year-round sustenance of the population. There was no off-season in the modern sense, simply different types of demanding work that followed nature's unyielding schedule. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some farmers would consult crude almanacs or rely on long-held folk wisdom, like observing the behavior of certain birds or the blooming of specific wildflowers, to predict the coming weather or determine the best time for planting. It's a bit like an ancient weather app, but powered by generations of accumulated lore, often more poetic than precise. You might find yourself peering intently at a flock of geese, trying to discern their message about the impending rain, or noting the exact day the swallows return, believing it held a clue for the planting schedule. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But it offered a sense of control in an otherwise unpredictable world. Historians still argue whether the reliance on traditional farming methods and seasonal cycles in Tudor England led to a remarkably sustainable agricultural system for its time, or if it also made communities highly vulnerable to unpredictable weather patterns and catastrophic crop failures. Was it a balanced ecosystem of human and nature, or a constant struggle against the whims of the elements? For you, the farmer, it was a precarious dance, with too much rain or too little, too much sun or not enough, always threatening your delicate livelihood. Summer brings warmer, longer days, and with them, the intense labor of tending. The fields are green and lush, but also filled with stubborn weeds that compete fiercely with your precious crops. You spend long hours bent over, painstakingly pulling these invaders by hand, your back aching, your skin tanned by the sun. The air hums with insects, and the distant drone of bees in the wildflowers is a constant companion. This is also the time for haymaking, a race against the clock to cut and dry the grass before the rains come, ensuring enough fodder for your livestock through the winter. The smell of freshly cut hay, sweet and green, would fill your nostrils, a truly evocative scent of summer. Then comes autumn, the pivotal season of harvest. This is the most critical period of the entire year, a feverish rush to gather the fruits of your labor before the weather turns. The golden fields of wheat and barley stand tall, heavy with grain, waiting for your scythe. The work is relentless, often from dawn until dusk, involving every able-bodied member of your family and often neighbors joining in a collective effort. The rhythmic swing of the scythe, the bundling of sheaves, the hauling of carts laden with grain back to the threshing floor. It's physically grueling, but imbued with a profound sense of purpose. The satisfaction of seeing your barn filled with the bounty of the earth is immense, a hard-won victory against the uncertainties of nature. This is when you truly know if you'll eat well, or merely survive, through the coming cold. Finally, winter descends, bringing shorter days, colder temperatures, and often snow and ice. The fields lie fallow, sleeping under a blanket of white. While the intense fieldwork eases, your days are still far from idle. This is a time for indoor tasks, repairing tools, mending clothes, tending to livestock in the warmth of the byre, and hauling firewood to keep the hearth burning. The evenings are long and dark, filled with the quiet companionship of your family, perhaps storytelling by the fire, or preparing wool for spinning. It's a time for reflection, for conserving energy, and for dreaming of the next spring. The world outside is harsh and unforgiving, but the warmth of your cottage and the certainty of the returning springs offer a profound sense of comfort. You learn to appreciate the quiet, reflective moments that winter brings, a necessary lull before the relentless demands of the new year begin again. As the harvest season winds down and the chilling winds of autumn begin to bite, your thoughts, as a Tudor farmer, inevitably turn to the bustling activity of market day. This isn't just a casual shopping trip. It's a crucial economic and social event, a vibrant lifeline connecting your isolated village to the wider world. Imagine the palpable excitement, the jostling crowds, and the cacophony of sounds as you approach the nearest market town, perhaps a few hours' walk or a longer cart ride away. The journey itself is part of the experience. You rise even earlier than usual, perhaps before the roosters have truly found their voice. Loading your cart with surplus produce, a few sacks of grain, a basket of eggs, perhaps a plump chicken or two, or maybe a small amount of cheese or wool. If you're lucky enough to own an ox or a horse, the journey is made slightly easier. Otherwise, you might be pushing a heavily laden wheelbarrow, or simply carrying baskets on your back. The path is often muddy, uneven, and potentially dangerous. but the promise of trade, of goods to sell and necessities to buy, propels you forward. You might walk with neighbors, forming a small convoy, sharing stories and warding off boredom or potential mischief. A mainstream historical fact is that markets were indispensable economic hubs in Tudor England, acting as the primary points of exchange for goods and services for most of the population. They were strictly regulated, with specific days designated for market activity, and tolls or fees often collected by the lord of the manor or the town authorities. Without the market, your self-sufficiency would quickly turn into true isolation. Now, for a quirky tidbit to ensure fair dealing, many markets had an official ale taster or bread weigher to check the quality and quantity of goods. Imagine someone whose actual job was to sample every batch of ale to make sure it wasn't watered down, or to rigorously weigh every loaf of bread to prevent cheating. It was an early form of consumer protection, though perhaps not always foolproof. You might cast a wary eye at such an official, hoping your own goods pass muster, or perhaps with a sly grin if you knew someone else's might not. Historians still argue whether the regulatory oversight in Tudor markets effectively protected the average farmer and consumer, or if it was primarily a mechanism for lords and merchants to extract additional revenue. Was it a shield for the honest trader, or just another layer of taxation? For you, the farmer, it was simply part of the landscape, another rule to navigate in the complex dance of commerce. Arriving at the market town is a sensory explosion after the quiet of your farm. The air is thick with the mingled scents of livestock, freshly baked bread, roasting meat from a street vendor, and the earthy aroma of countless goods. The sounds are overwhelming: the bleating of sheep, the squeal of pigs, the shouts of hawkers, the chatter of hundreds of voices, and the rhythmic clatter of carts on cobblestones. It's a vibrant, chaotic symphony of commerce and community. You make your way to the designated area for farmers, staking out your small plot. The process of selling your produce is a patient game of negotiation. You display your goods, hoping they look appealing, and wait for customers. There's no fixed pricing. Every sale is a negotiation, a subtle back and forth over a few pennies or farthings. You learn to read faces, to gauge sincerity, to hold your ground without being greedy. A good price for your eggs means a little extra to buy something truly needed. This isn't just transactional, it's a social interaction, a test of your wit and patience. But market day isn't just about selling, it's also about essential purchases. You need salt for preserving meat, new iron for a worn tool, perhaps some cloth for your wife to spin into clothing, or a new pair of sturdy boots. You carefully ration your earnings, prioritizing needs over wants. You visit the various stalls: the mercer for fabric, the ironmonger for metalware, the chandler for candles, and perhaps a specialized stall for spices or a rare indulgence like a small piece of sugar. Every purchase is a significant decision, weighed against the needs of your family and the demands of the coming season. Market day also serves as your primary link to news and information from outside your immediate village. You might overhear conversations about royal decrees, news of distant wars or rebellions, or simply gossip from neighboring towns. It's a chance to see new faces, to observe different fashions, and to feel, however fleetingly, connected to a wider world beyond your fields and familiar faces. It's your weekly newspaper, radio, and social media, all rolled into one bustling event. By late afternoon, as the shadows lengthen and the crowds begin to thin, you pack up your unsold goods, your purchases carefully secured. The return journey is quieter, often accompanied by a sense of exhaustion, but also a quiet satisfaction. You have successfully navigated the complexities of commerce, provided for your family, and absorbed a week's worth of news. As you trudge back towards the familiar silhouette of your cottage, the market's echoes fade, replaced by the comforting sounds of your farm, leaving you to prepare for another cycle of slow, demanding days, returning from the bustling market, or simply after a long day in the fields. Your focus shifts back to the intimate confines of your home, to the core of your existence, the hearth and home. This isn't just a dwelling, it's the heart of your family's survival, a place where roles are clearly defined, tasks are endless, and the warmth of the fire is a constant, reassuring presence. You step over the worn threshold, the familiar smells of wood smoke, simmering stew, and damp earth wrapping around you like a well-worn cloak. Imagine the small, often single-roomed cottage, built of timber frames and wattle and daub, with a thatched roof that keeps out most of the rain. Most of the time. The floor is likely packed earth, swept clean, but perpetually dusty or muddy, depending on the weather. The central feature is the hearth, a stone-lined pit or raised platform where a fire constantly burns. This isn't just for warmth, it's your kitchen, your light source, and often the focal point for family gatherings. You might see pots hanging over the flames, slowly simmering a perpetual pottage, or bread baking in the hot ashes. The smoke, in many older cottages, simply found its way out through a hole in the roof or seeped through the thatch, lending a characteristic smoky aroma to everything within. A mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of Tudor homes, especially in rural areas, were small, simple, and functional, prioritizing warmth, shelter, and the ability to cook over comfort or elaborate design. Privacy, as we understand it today, was a luxury rarely afforded. Families lived, worked, and often slept in very close quarters. Now, for a quirky tidbit to keep the precious fire alive overnight, a lump of peat or a large log would be carefully buried in the ashes, a practice known as banking the fire. This ensured there were still embers in the morning to rekindle the flame without the laborious process of striking flint and steel. Imagine the careful ritual each night, ensuring the warmth and cooking capabilities for the next day were secured. It was a subtle act of foresight, a quiet acknowledgement of the challenges of daily existence. You might even have a special tool, a small shovel or poker, just for this task, a testament to its importance. Historians still argue whether the perceived lack of material comfort in Tudor peasant homes was genuinely a hardship, or if their close communal living and focus on practical needs fostered a different kind of contentment. Were they perpetually uncomfortable, or did their simplicity bring a unique resilience and connection? For you, it was simply how life was lived, and the warmth of your hearth was a genuine luxury against the biting English cold. Within this humble abode, family roles are clearly defined, though often overlapping. As the male head of the household, your primary responsibility is the heavy field work, the animals, and major repairs. Your wife, however, is the undisputed mistress of the hearth and home, her work no less demanding or crucial. She manages the domestic economy, transforming raw farm produce into edible meals, preserving food for winter, and managing the precious stores. She would be constantly engaged in baking, brewing small beer, churning butter, and making cheese. Her hands are never idle, moving from one vital task to the next with practiced efficiency. She is also responsible for the textile production. Imagine the rhythmic hum of the spinning wheel, or the clack of the loom, as she transforms raw wool from your sheep into yarn, and then into sturdy cloth for clothing. Every tunic, every cloak, every blanket is the product of countless hours of her labor. She mends worn garments, patches holes, and repurposes old fabrics, ensuring that nothing goes to waste. The sewing needle, for her, is as vital a tool as your scythe is for you. This meticulous care for clothing reflects the scarcity of resources and the value placed on every thread. Children, as we'll touch on later, also have their defined chores, contributing from a young age. Daughters assist their mother in the domestic sphere, learning skills that will prepare them for their own future households. Sons work alongside their father, gradually mastering the demanding arts of farming. Every family member is an integral part of the survival unit, their collective efforts essential for the household's well-being. There's no allowance for idleness. Everyone pulls their weight. Evenings, after the day's hard labor, are spent in the warm glow of the fire. There's no electric light, so darkness falls early, prompting activities that rely on warmth and companionship rather than bright illumination. Supper, another simple meal of pottage or bread and cheese, is eaten together. This is a time for quiet conversation, for sharing the day's events, for storytelling, and for simple games or riddles. The crackle of the fire and the murmur of voices fill the small space, creating a profound sense of security and togetherness. It's a fundamental human comfort, this shared warmth and quiet camaraderie at the end of a long, arduous day, preparing you for the deep, unburdened sleep that comes from honest toil. As dusk settles over your humble Tudor cottage, bringing with it the pervasive chill of the English countryside, the focus of your day subtly shifts. The demands of the fields, and the ceaseless outdoor chores give way to the quieter, more intimate rituals of evening's dim light. This is the time for supper, for storytelling, and for the slow, deliberate preparations for sleep. A profound unwinding after hours of relentless physical exertion. You find yourself drawn instinctively to the hearth, the last bastion of warmth and light against the encroaching darkness. Imagine the flickering glow of the fire casting dancing shadows on the packed earth floor and the timbered walls. There are no electric lights, of course, so the fire is your primary source of illumination, supplemented perhaps by a tallow candle or a rushlight, giving off a faint, smoky scent. This limited light encourages intimacy and brings people closer, physically and emotionally. The outside world, once vibrant with the sounds of the farm, now recedes into an impenetrable darkness, making the confines of your cottage feel like a safe, self-contained universe. A mainstream historical fact is that artificial lighting in Tudor rural homes was minimal and expensive, making evenings a period often dedicated to tasks that could be done by firelight, or to purely social activities like conversation and storytelling. The concept of nightlife, as we know it, simply didn't exist for the vast majority of the population. Darkness brought a profound shift in activity. Now, for a quirky tidbit to maximize the dim light of a candle or rushlight, some families would place it in front of a polished metal plate or a whitewashed wall to reflect the light, effectively creating a crude but ingenious form of amplification. Imagine your wife carefully positioning a small, precious candle, trying to squeeze every last bit of illumination from it, ensuring enough light for mending or simple craftwork. It's a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness born of necessity, squeezing every ounce of utility out of scarce resources. Historians still argue whether the limited evening light fostered stronger communal bonds and oral traditions, or if it also limited opportunities for individual study and intellectual development for the common person. Did it create a cozy, narrative-rich environment, or did it subtly restrict personal growth? For you, the farmer, it was simply the reality of existence, and you learned to cherish the shared moments in the fire's gentle embrace. Supper, the evening meal, is typically a simpler affair than midday dinner, often consisting of leftovers from earlier in the day or a fresh, hot bowl of pottage simmered over the hearth. This thick, hearty stew, made from grains, vegetables, and whatever scraps of meat might be available, would have been slowly bubbling all afternoon, filling the cottage with its comforting aroma. You sit together as a family, perhaps on low stools or a bench, sharing the food from a communal bowl or individual trenchers. Flat pieces of stale bread used as plates, which would then be eaten or given to the dogs. The conversation is quieter now, reflective, as the day's physical toll begins to truly settle in. This is the prime time for storytelling, with no books for most, and no external entertainment like radio or television. Oral traditions flourish. You might tell tales of your ancestors, local folklore, or stories from the Bible, simplified and recounted from memory. Your children listen intently, their faces illuminated by the firelight, absorbing the wisdom, the history, and the moral lessons woven into each narrative. Your wife might recount news heard at the communal well, or share a riddle she learned from a passing peddler. These stories are not just entertainment. They are the bedrock of your shared history, the continuity of your culture, passed down generation by generation in the quiet glow of the evening. As the hour grows later, activities slowly wind down. Perhaps your wife continues her spinning or mending by the firelight, her hands moving with practiced ease. You might check on the banked fire, ensuring enough embers remain to be rekindled in the morning. The preparations for sleep are simple: removing your day clothes, perhaps changing into a simple linen shift. There's no elaborate nighttime routine, no lengthy bathing rituals. Cleanliness is practical and utilitarian, often involving simple washes with cold water. Finally, you retire to your shared bed, often a straw mattress, perhaps with a wool blanket for warmth. The sounds of the night begin to filter in the hoot of an owl, the distant bark of a fox, the gentle creak of the cottage in the wind. The day's aches are profound, but so too is the satisfaction of honest labor. You lie there, listening to the gentle breathing of your sleeping family, feeling the deep, physical exhaustion that leads to a profound, untroubled sleep. There are no lingering worries about emails or deadlines. Your world is simple, immediate, and utterly dependent on the cycles of nature. The quiet of the Tudor night envelops you, a peaceful blanket after a long, slow day of enduring toil, preparing you for the next dawn chorus. While the relentless rhythm of field work and domestic chores defined most of your days as a Tudor farmer, life wasn't entirely devoid of respite. There were precious, eagerly anticipated moments of celebration, the feast days and fairs. These were the rare, luminous breaks from routine, splashes of color and revelry in an otherwise monochrome existence, offering a chance to gather, to trade, and perhaps most importantly, to simply enjoy yourself. You've just finished a particularly arduous period of labor, and the air hums with a quiet excitement, a palpable anticipation of freedom and festivity. Imagine the sense of liberation as a designated feast day, often a religious holiday, finally arrives. For many, this meant a complete cessation of work, a rare day when the plow sat idle and the spinning wheel was silent. The church bells would ring, not just for prayer, but as a joyful announcement of leisure. You might put on your best, though still simple and practical clothes. Perhaps a tunic dyed with some precious color, or a freshly mended jerkin. The entire village would stir with activity, preparing for communal gatherings, a stark contrast to the usual solitary toil in the fields. A mainstream historical fact is that the calendar of the medieval and early modern period was punctuated by numerous religious feast days and saints' days, which were traditionally observed as holidays. While their strict observance might have varied, they nonetheless provided essential breaks from labor and opportunities for communal celebration. deeply intertwining religious practice with daily life. These days were mandated pauses, vital for physical and spiritual replenishment. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some feast days were celebrated with specific, often peculiar, local traditions. You might find your village engaging in a bizarre egg-tossing contest, or a ceremonial dance around a particularly old oak tree. Rituals rooted in pre-Christian customs subtly absorbed into Christian festivities. Imagine the serious faces of the elders as they explain the precise, nonsensical rules of such a game, or the coordinated clumsiness of a village-wide dance, bringing laughter and a sense of shared identity. These were the moments that made your village unique, binding generations to quirky, charming rites. Historians still argue whether the Church's encouragement of feast days was primarily for spiritual devotion, a shrewd way to manage peasant labor by providing necessary rest, or a method to maintain social cohesion through communal festivities. Was it about piety, productivity, or peace? It was likely a complex interplay of all three, recognizing that even the most devout soul needed a break from endless toil. Beyond religious observances, the grander events were the fairs. These were less frequent, perhaps held only once or twice a year in larger market towns, but they were events of immense excitement. Unlike regular market days, fairs were often much larger, attracting merchants, entertainers, and visitors from far and wide. The journey to a fair could take a full day or more, making it a significant undertaking. You might travel with your family, the children wide-eyed with anticipation, clutching the few coins you've managed to save for this special occasion. Arriving at the fairground would be an overwhelming sensory experience. The air would be thick with the aroma of roasting meat, sweet spiced cakes, and the unfamiliar scent of exotic goods brought by long-distance traders. The noise would be deafening, the braying of animals, the shouts of merchants, the calls of jugglers and acrobats, the strains of pipes and drums, and the general clamor of hundreds, even thousands, of people gathered together. It's a sensory overload, a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds that are a complete antithesis to your quiet farm life. You'd probably feel a bit dizzy from it all, but utterly exhilarated. At the fair, you might sell any surplus animals you have, or specialized craft items that fetch a better price than at your local market. But the fair is also a chance to purchase goods not typically available in your village. Fine linens, specialized tools, perhaps a piece of brightly colored pottery, or even a rare spice from faraway lands. These are precious acquisitions, carefully considered and haggled over, providing a tangible connection to the broader world. You might even witness new technologies or inventions being demonstrated. Rudimentary, but fascinating. But the true allure of fairs was the diversion and entertainment. There would be wandering minstrels playing music, acrobats performing daring feats, and perhaps even crude theatrical performances reenacting biblical stories or local legends. You might watch a wrestling match, or marvel at a trained bear, though such spectacles were becoming less common due to changing laws and attitudes. There would be games of chance, opportunities to try new foods, and simply the joy of being amidst a vast crowd, sharing in a collective sense of merriment and wonder. For a brief period, the relentless demands of the farm would fade into the background, replaced by laughter, excitement, and a profound sense of shared humanity. These feast days and fairs were not merely interruptions to the drudgery. They were essential pressure valves, providing psychological and social release. They reaffirmed communal bonds, offered opportunities for trade and social mobility, and, most importantly, reminded you that life was not just about endless labor, but also about moments of joy, celebration, and connection. As you trudge home, tired but content, the echoes of laughter and music still ringing in your ears, you carry with you a renewed spirit, ready to face the slow, steady rhythm of your farm life until the next precious celebration. While the vibrant energy of market days and the joyful release of feast days offered much-needed respite, the daily reality of Tudor farm life also brought with it a constant, underlying concern, health, and remedies. There were no doctor's offices down the lane, no pharmacies stocking shelves with endless pills. Your well-being, and that of your family, often rested on folk medicine, inherited wisdom, and the sheer resilience of your body against the array of common ailments that could strike at any moment. Imagine a hushed cottage, a feverish child, and the desperate application of age-old remedies, hope on against hope for a turn of the tide. Life was hard, physically demanding, and often precarious. Simple cuts could fester. A common cold could turn into a life-threatening fever. And childbirth was a perilous journey for both mother and infant. The general understanding of hygiene was rudimentary by modern standards, contributing to the spread of illness. You'd be acutely aware of the fragility of life, the ever-present shadow of disease. The loss of an animal was a financial blow. The loss of a family member was a devastating void, often accepted with a stoic resignation born of pervasive experience. A mainstream historical fact is that life expectancy in Tudor England was significantly lower than today, particularly due to high infant mortality rates and the prevalence of infectious diseases like influenza, dysentery, and the dreaded plague. A farmer who reached old age, perhaps 50 or 60, was considered to have lived a long and fortunate life, a testament to their strength and good fortune. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some common ailments were believed to be cured by surprisingly unusual methods, often involving sympathetic magic or strange concoctions. For example, a common remedy for warts might involve rubbing them with a piece of meat, then burying the meat, believing that as the meat decayed, so too would the wart. Or, for a cough, you might be given a brew containing honey, herbs, and perhaps even some less palatable ingredients, often with a prayer mumbled over it. Imagine a neighbor earnestly advising you to try burying a piece of bacon to cure your persistent wart, convinced of its efficacy. It's a blend of desperation, observation and pure, unadulterated superstition. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of Tudor folk remedies was purely psychological, the placebo effect, or if some possessed genuine, albeit unscientific, medicinal properties derived from empirical observation of herbs and natural substances. Were these cures truly effective, or just elaborate hope? It was likely a mixed bag, with some herbal treatments offering real relief, while others were entirely harmless or, occasionally, actively detrimental. For you, the farmer, you used what was available, what was passed down, and what seemed to have worked before. Your primary source of medical knowledge was often the elderly women of the village, particularly those with a reputation as cunning folk or healers. They possessed extensive knowledge of local herbs, their properties, and how to prepare them into poultices, infusions, or salves. You would turn to them for advice on everything from a sprained ankle to a persistent cough, trusting their accumulated wisdom passed down through generations. They were your local pharmacists and diagnosticians, offering comfort and care where formal medicine was unattainable. Common remedies often revolved around herbal infusions. For a stomach upset, you might be given mint or chamomile tea. For a fever, a strong brew of willow bark containing salicin, a precursor to aspirin, might be administered. Cuts and sores would be cleaned with boiled water and perhaps covered with a poultice of comfrey or plantain, both known for their soothing and antiseptic properties. Broken bones were crudely set and splinted, often leading to lasting deformities if not handled perfectly. The pain was simply endured, a constant companion. Beyond physical ailments, there was also a pervasive belief in the influence of spiritual forces on health. Illness could be seen as a punishment, or the result of witchcraft or evil spirits. Remedies might therefore include prayers, charms, or visits to local holy wells, alongside the practical applications of herbs. This holistic approach, blending the physical with the spiritual, was characteristic of the era. You might find yourself murmuring a prayer over a sick child, even as you applied a warm compress, covering all your bases. For more serious illnesses, or those beyond the scope of local healers, recourse was limited. A trip to a town's barber surgeon for bloodletting or basic surgery was a desperate last resort, often more dangerous than the ailment itself due to primitive understanding of infection. You simply had to be tough, resilient, and hope for the best. This constant negotiation with illness and injury instilled a profound sense of pragmatism and fatalism. You learned to live with aches and pains, to distinguish between a minor ailment and a life-threatening condition. The slow days of the Tudor farmer were punctuated by these moments of quiet suffering and diligent care, a constant reminder of humanity's enduring vulnerability and the vital importance of the knowledge passed down from your ancestors, offering what comfort and healing they could in a world without modern medicine. Beyond the daily grind of your fields and the intimate confines of your home, a larger, invisible structure, profoundly shaped your Tudor life, the intricacies of land ownership, specifically the relationship between your tenancy, the rents you paid, and the pervasive influence of the lord of the manor. You didn't truly own your land in the modern sense. You held it, often precariously, at the will of a powerful figure whose decisions could make or break your family. Imagine working tirelessly on a patch of earth that, at any moment, could be taken from you. A constant, low-level hum of anxiety beneath the daily toil. For most Tudor farmers, outright land ownership was a distant dream. Instead, you were likely a copyholder or a leaseholder. A copyholder held land by copy of court roll, meaning your right to farm a specific plot was recorded in the manor court's records. This gave you a degree of security, often hereditary, meaning your children could theoretically inherit your tenancy. However, you still owed duties and payments to the lord. A leaseholder, on the other hand, had a more finite agreement, renting land for a specific number of years, usually 21 or 99, or for a period defined by the lives of certain individuals. This offered less security, as the lease could simply not be renewed. This complex web of tenure dictated much of your economic reality and daily freedom. A mainstream historical fact is that the manorial system, with its hierarchy of lords, tenants, and customary rights, was still a dominant feature of English rural life during the Tudor period, albeit undergoing gradual changes. This system structured social relations, economic obligations, and access to resources for the vast majority of the population. Your life, from cradle to grave, was largely defined by your place within this ancient feudal framework. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some lords were known to demand peculiar boon work from their tenants, beyond regular rents or labor. This might involve a specific number of days plowing the lord's own land, providing transport for his goods, or even presenting him with a certain number of chickens or eggs on specific feast days. Imagine trudging over to the lord's demesne, tired from your own fields, to work his land without pay, or having to select your plumpest hen for his table. It was a constant reminder of who held the true power, a subtle assertion of feudal authority over your daily life. Historians still argue whether the manorial system, despite its inherent inequalities, provided a stable, predictable framework for rural life, or if it was inherently exploitative and stifled agricultural innovation among the peasantry. Did it offer a sense of security and community, or was it a burdensome yoke of oppression? For you, the farmer, it was simply the established order, a system you navigated with quiet determination, hoping to avoid the lord's displeasure. The primary obligation to your lord was, of course, rent. This could be paid in various forms: money rent, a fixed sum of coin; rent in kind, a portion of your harvest, animals, or other produce; or labor rent, a specified number of days working directly on the lord's domain, his personal land. The specific terms varied widely from manor to manor and could be altered at the lord's discretion, especially for leaseholders. A bad harvest could mean immense hardship in meeting these obligations, potentially leading to debt or, in the worst cases, eviction. The constant pressure of making rent was a heavy burden, a silent calculation always running in your mind. Beyond rent, you were also subject to the manor court, presided over by the lord or his steward. This court handled local disputes, enforced manorial customs, registered land transfers, and levied fines for infractions, from straying animals to disputes over common land usage. It was a form of local justice, often swift and undeniably biased towards the Lord's interests. You might attend its sessions with a mix of apprehension and curiosity, hoping no one was reporting your own minor trespasses. The lord of the manor also controlled access to vital common resources, the village mill for grinding grain for which you paid a toll, the common pastures where your animals grazed, and the woodlands where you might gather firewood or timber for repairs. These shared resources were essential for your survival, and the Lord's ability to restrict or charge for their use gave him immense power over your daily life. The threat of enclosure, where common lands were fenced off for private use, was a growing concern in some areas, robbing farmers of vital grazing or foraging grounds and disrupting centuries-old customs. This dependence on the Lord meant that his character and decisions directly impacted your life. A benevolent Lord might ensure stable rents and fair dealings, while an avaricious or absentee Lord could make your existence miserable, demanding higher payments or denying customary rights. Your loyalty, or at least your compliance, was crucial, as overt defiance could result in severe penalties. This dynamic created a subtle power struggle, a constant negotiation between your need to survive and the Lord's desire to extract wealth. The heavy hand of authority, though sometimes gentle, was always present, reminding you that your hard-won bounty ultimately flowed through the hands of another. It was a bedrock reality, shaping every slow, laborious day. Within the small, bustling confines of your Tudor farm, every pair of hands counted, and from a remarkably young age. Children were not merely dependents, but integral contributors. This brings us to the subtle but relentless reality of children's chores, the youngsters' contributions to the family farm. A life far removed from modern schooling and carefree play. Imagine tiny figures, perhaps barely tall enough to see over the kitchen table, already engaged in tasks that directly impacted their family's survival. Their small hands learning the rhythm of labor. From the moment they could walk, Tudor children began to absorb the workings of the farm through observation and imitation. Formal schooling was a rarity for peasant children, reserved for the very wealthy or those destined for the church. Instead, their education was practical, hands-on, and utterly indispensable. Their classroom was the farmyard, the fields, and the hearth. They learned by doing, by watching, and by being gently, then firmly, guided into their roles. There was no concept of a childhood free from responsibility. Survival demanded that every member of the family pull their weight. A mainstream historical fact is that child labor was ubiquitous across all social classes in Tudor England, though the nature of the work varied. For farming families, children were vital members of the labor force, their contributions essential for the household's economic viability. Their value was often measured by their ability to contribute to the family's sustenance and income. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some children would be given specific, often repetitive, tasks to do while sitting, such as meticulously picking stones out of sacks of grain or separating out impurities from wool. Imagine a small child, their fingers nimble, meticulously removing tiny pebbles, their mind perhaps wandering to fantasies of wild adventures, even as their body remained utterly still and productive. It was a clever way to utilize even the smallest hands for essential, if tedious, work, keeping them out of mischief and instilling a sense of duty from a very early age. You might even have seen them using a small, specially carved wooden tool for such a task, perfectly suited for tiny hands. Historians still argue whether the early integration of children into farm labor fostered a stronger sense of family unity and practical competence, or if it deprived them of opportunities for intellectual development and a more extended period of carefree play. Did it build resilient, capable individuals, or did it stunt their growth in other areas? It was likely a complex trade-off, with the harsh realities of survival often dictating the balance. For the youngest children, tasks began simply. They might be responsible for collecting eggs from the chicken coop, a seemingly small chore, but one that required gentleness and a keen eye. They could be tasked with gathering firewood and kindling, bringing in armfuls of twigs and larger logs to keep the precious hearth fire burning. They would fetch water from the communal well or nearby stream, carrying small buckets carefully, trying not to spill a single drop of this vital resource. These were early lessons in responsibility and the direct link between effort and outcome. As they grew slightly older, perhaps around 7 or 8, their duties would become more demanding. Boys would begin to accompany their fathers to the fields, initially acting as bird scarers, running and shouting to keep crows and rooks away from freshly sown seeds or ripening crops. This might sound like fun for a few minutes, but imagine doing it for hours on end, day after day, under a hot sun or in chilling winds, your voice growing hoarse. They would learn to lead the plow horse or oxen, guiding the powerful beasts along the furrows, their small hands gripping the rope with surprising strength. They would also assist with the livestock, helping to herd sheep or muck out the byre. Getting accustomed to the smells and sounds of the animals they would soon be fully responsible for. Girls, meanwhile, would intensify their contributions to the domestic sphere. They would assist their mothers with meal preparation, learning to knead dough, prepare vegetables, and tend to the simmering pottage. Spinning wool was a ubiquitous chore, and you'd often see girls, even quite young ones, seated by the fire, their fingers deftly working the spinning wheel, turning raw fleece into thread. They would also be responsible for mending clothes, carefully stitching patches onto worn garments, learning skills that were absolutely essential for maintaining the family's wardrobe. Collecting wild berries or foraging for edible plants in the nearby woods were also common tasks, contributing directly to the family's larder. The nature of these chores instilled a deep sense of discipline, resilience, and practical knowledge. Tudor children understood, instinctively, the value of hard work and the precariousness of their existence. They learned to be resourceful, to make do with what they had, and to contribute to the collective good of the family unit. There was a direct, undeniable link between their efforts and their family's ability to eat, to stay warm, and to survive another season. This constant engagement, this inherent purpose, shaped them into the resilient, capable adults they would need to become. And as the day drew to a close, and the tired children finally collapsed into sleep, it was the deep, dreamless rest earned from a day of honest, necessary toil, a small but vital cog in the slow-turning machinery of Tudor farm life. As the vibrant, demanding seasons of spring, summer, and autumn dictate the frantic pace of fieldwork, there arrives a period of relative calm, a quieter chapter in the Tudor farmer's year, winter's long rest. This isn't a cessation of labor, mind you, but a significant shift in its nature. The biting cold, the shorter days, and often the blanket of snow transform the landscape, forcing your efforts indoors or to less demanding, yet still vital, tasks. Imagine the profound quiet that descends upon the fields, the world muffled by frost, and the comforting crackle of your hearth fire becoming the dominant sound in your life. The cessation of active fieldwork doesn't mean idleness. It simply means redirection. The ground is frozen or too waterlogged to plow. The crops have been harvested and stored, and new growth lies dormant. This allows for a focus on maintenance, preparation, and the domestic sphere. You spend more time in your cottage, its warmth a precious shield against the harsh elements outside. This time is crucial for both physical recovery from the grueling harvest and for mental replenishment. A chance to slow down the relentless pace that defined the warmer months. A mainstream historical fact is that winter was a period of reduced outdoor agricultural activity across pre-industrial Europe, necessitating a shift to indoor crafts, maintenance, and social activities. This seasonal rhythm was universal, shaping the cultural practices and social calendars of rural communities for centuries. The pattern of work and rest was not invented by humans, but dictated by the very spin of the earth around the sun. Now, for a quirky tidbit to combat the pervasive cold and darkness. Some Tudor farmers would brew stronger ales in winter, or engage in more elaborate storytelling sessions by the fire, sometimes even inviting neighbors over for communal spinning or mending gatherings. Imagine the shared warmth, the deeper conversations, the rich tapestry of tales woven in the flickering firelight, all intensified by the bleakness outside. It was a time when the human need for connection and shared warmth was perhaps most acutely felt and expressed. You might even find yourself enjoying a particularly dark, malty brew as you listen to a long, meandering story about a mischievous sprite from generations past. Historians still argue whether the quietude of winter fostered greater introspection and closer family bonds, or if the extended periods of darkness and cold led to increased hardship, illness, and isolation for rural communities. Was it a time for serene contemplation, or merely a period of endured suffering? For you, the farmer, it was a complex blend, a welcome physical respite, certainly, but also a time of heightened anxiety about dwindling food stores and the ever-present threat of severe weather or illness. Your days in winter are still full, but the tasks are different. A significant portion of your time is dedicated to caring for your livestock indoors. Animals that could graze freely in summer now require constant feeding with precious hay and fodder, meticulously gathered during the warmer months. You spend hours in the byre and stable, hauling feed, mucking out stalls, and ensuring your animals have fresh water, often breaking ice from troughs. The warmth of their bodies, packed together in the confined space, is a surprising comfort in the chill. You'll check them for signs of illness or injury more frequently, knowing that a sick animal in winter is a much greater risk to your family's survival. This is also the prime season for repair and maintenance. With no fields to tend, you finally have time to mend tools that suffered damage during the harvest, sharpen blades, and replace worn handles. You might engage in carpentry, perhaps building a new chest, repairing a broken stool, or shoring up a sagging roof beam. The clatter of hammer on wood, the rasp of a file on metal, are the new soundtracks to your days. These meticulous repairs are not just tasks, they are investments in the coming year, ensuring your equipment is ready when spring bursts forth. Every successful mend is a small victory against the elements and against decay. Within the cottage, your wife and daughters are tirelessly engaged in textile work. The spinning wheel hums almost constantly, transforming the sheep's wool into yarn. This yarn is then used for knitting thick stockings and gloves, or woven into cloth for new tunics and cloaks. Patching and mending old clothes is also a continuous activity, making them last as long as possible. The warmth of the fire often determines their workspace, drawing them close together as they work by its flickering light. The rhythmic nature of these tasks, the steady turning of the wheel, the rhythmic click of knitting needles, provides a comforting backdrop to the long, dark hours. Evenings are prolonged, filled with the simple, calming routines we touched on earlier. After supper, the family gathers around the hearth. This is a time for more extensive storytelling, for riddles, for teaching children rudimentary lessons, or simply for quiet companionship. The lack of external stimulation means that inner worlds and shared narratives become paramount. It's a period for reflection, for sharing wisdom, and for reinforcing family bonds in the face of the external cold. The world outside may be bleak, but inside your cottage, there is warmth, light, and the enduring comfort of human connection. While often challenging, winter provided a crucial pause, a necessary seasonal rhythm that allowed the land, the animals, and indeed, yourself, to rest and recuperate. It was a time for preparing for the next cycle, for rebuilding strength, and for reinforcing the social ties that would see your community through another demanding year. As the days slowly began to lengthen, even imperceptibly, a quiet sense of anticipation would begin to build. The promise of spring's return offering a gentle, calming hope, pulling you forward through the quiet, deep slumber of the land. Sweet dreams.